Journalist? It's a profession that naturally comes with its fair share of strange and bizarre encounters. So today's stories comes from a journalist who shared them on a forum. He actually had quite a few, but I've only picked 3 of the most intriguing ones. Good news, no jump scares in this video, so feel free to watch without worry. Up until today, 2009, the year I'm posting this, I've been a reporter for exactly 12 years. This April, I got reassigned to a new position and my workload became a lot lighter. So I figured I'd take some time to share a few personal experiences, not just to tell a good story, but also to mark my 12 years in this field. I live in the capital of a southern province, and when I first started out, I worked at the city's cable TV station. Back in 1998, the Broadcasting and Television Bureau issued a directive requiring local TV stations and radio frequencies to merge into one network. As part of the plan, 2 TV stations put funds to construct a brand new building. Now, this was a huge project, one that was bound to make a lot of people rich. But of course, those same people were on edge, praying nothing would go wrong during construction, especially not a major safety incident. But as fate would have it, things didn't go as planned. By late 2000, the building was almost finished and partially in use. One day, the deputy mayor came for an inspection. She walked around, looked everything over, and seemed pretty satisfied. But just 2 minutes after she left, the studio ceiling suddenly came crashing down. First, people heard a series of deafening crashes, then a huge section of the first floor lobby just caved in. The noise was so loud it scared the hell out of everyone, if only for a split second. Rescue efforts started immediately. Construction workers rushed in first, and soon after, the police and firefighters arrived. They worked tirelessly through the night, and by early morning, they'd managed to pull out 8 survivors. Luckily, they hadn't been buried too deep. Most had crush injuries, but nothing fatal. Unfortunately, one worker wasn't so lucky. He had been killed instantly by a falling lighting frame. Just when everyone thought the worst was over, early the next morning, a worker suddenly spoke up. Wait, there should be still one more person. The contractor did a head count, and sure enough, they were missing someone. A young man named Liu, not even 20 years old. He had definitely been working in the studio that day. No hesitation, they launched another search. They combed through the wreckage for an entire day. Nothing. A week later, even after completely clearing out the rubble, still no sign of him. In desperation, they called Liu's parents, hoping maybe, just maybe, he had made it out and gone home. But no, Liu was just gone. After that, the station focused on handling compensation and everything went smoothly, except for one thing, Liu. When his family got the news, they rushed to the station, demanding answers and causing a scene. But strangely, after just 3 days, they stopped coming. Word had it that they had accepted a sum of money to settle the matter, and just like that, the whole incident faded from conversation. Until the new building officially opened, that's when things took a turn. The first person to experience something strange was a late-night radio host. She ran a hotline show from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., covering rather suggestive topics. One afternoon, she and her producer were suddenly summoned to the boss office and got absolutely chewed out. Did you 2 fall asleep last night? Why the hell was there dead air from 11 to 11:30? What? That's impossible. We were taking calls the whole time. Maybe your car radio was acting up? Bullshit! Several listeners called this morning, all asking why the show went silent during that time. Still confused, the host turned to the producer. Could it have been an equipment failure? No way, I was watching the audio levels the whole time. There was no dead air. They checked the equipment. Everything was perfectly fine. That's when the host suddenly remembered the call she had taken around that time. It was a young man. He said he was 18 and that he was going to die without ever having been in love. Thinking he was suicidal, she immediately tried to comfort him. Don't be so hard on yourself. If you're heartbroken, That's no reason to give up. You'll find someone who truly loves you one day. And if you're sick and can't afford treatment, we can rally our listeners to help. But the young man didn't answer. He just cried softly, then hung up. At the time, the host had been confused, but now, putting it together with the missing 15 minutes of silence, she started feeling uneasy. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the station about a vengeful ghost call. People started pointing out that her broadcasting studio was on the 5th floor, directly above the studio where the ceiling had collapsed. Some began to believe the caller was Liu, the young man who had gone missing, that he had never made it out, that his body was still buried somewhere in the rubble. And now he was calling for justice. The more the host thought about it, the more creeped out she felt. In the end, she ended up taking the day off. Of course, that was far from the end. From that day on, weird things kept happening again and again. Perfectly good tapes would mysteriously lose their recordings. The elevators would start moving on their own at midnight. Before long, nobody wanted to be on night duty anymore, and this obviously started affecting work. Finally, one of the older reporters who covered the police beat had had enough. He figured this whole ghost call story was nonsense and decided to settle it once and for all. So he privately reached out to the police and asked them to trace the call from that night. He was expecting proof that it was just some prank or misunderstanding. Instead, what he got was even more unsettling. The records showed the call had come from a power substation that was about to be relocated, not far from the new building. But that room only contained transformers, and the doors and windows were securely locked, no sign of forced entry. And the night watchman, who had been stationed outside the whole time, swore to heaven that nobody had entered. So it was as if the call had come from nowhere, and it almost confirmed that the building really was haunted. Panic spread through the station until 2 unexpected guests arrived. In the summer of 2001, 2 Thai wood elephants were invited into the station. They were adorable, carved with open, smiling mouths and their right front legs raised. But strangely, they weren't placed in a decorative spot. Instead, they were set up at the entrance to the studio, deep inside the building. It was clear these elephants weren't just for show. Therefore, rumors spread fast. People started saying these were secret guardian elephants from Thailand, originally used to protect temples. The station had allegedly spent 2 million yuan to bring them in, for one reason and one reason only: to suppress whatever thing had been lurking in that building. Maybe it was psychological, maybe the elephants really did work their magic. But after they arrived, the strange occurrences completely stopped. People started staying late again. Well, everyone except the host. She flat out refused to ever hold the nighttime hotline again. You might think this is not a satisfying ending. Did that young man, Liu, really just disappear like that? Well, let me tell you something that feels like the true final chapter of this story. 3 years later, 3 deputy station directors were taken down for financial crimes related to the station's construction. 2 of them managed to avoid prison, but the third, he wasn't so lucky. He was sentenced to 7 years behind bars. The weirdest part is, the one who went to prison was the exact person who had been in charge of the studio's construction. So, was it just a result of a power struggle, or was it divine justice at work? Well, based on my experience, the most likely reason for the studio collapse was that the people in charge cut corners during construction. So in a way, Liu's death was truly unjust. If it came back for revenge in the end, I say it was well deserved. Friends, can you imagine a woman so captivating that she has an entire group of old men completely under her spell? Well, whatever you are picturing in your head, I can guarantee Ma Guiying looks nothing like that. This happened when I was invited to a rural village to interview a middle-aged woman. People said she had unusually close relationships with many elderly men in town, and even more shockingly, they had been giving her a large sum of money. They wanted me to investigate. The first time I met Ma Guiying, I didn't see anything special about her. She had a round face, was on the heavier side, and her skin was a bit dull. But oddly enough, she had barely any wrinkles for someone her age. At first, she seemed a little nervous during our interview, but she quickly relaxed, smiling as if we were having a casual chat. But there was one thing that really surprised me. Her Mandarin was flawless. I mean, perfect. From my experience, her pronunciation was so precise that it could rival that of a broadcasting student. That alone made me suspicious. When I asked her about the elderly man, she casually brushed it off, saying they were just good friends. Sure, they had given her tens of thousands yuan in total, but in her mind, it wasn't scamming. It was just gifts between friends, freely given. But then, I noticed something even stranger. Why weren't their families stepping in? This was a small village, and something like this would normally be a huge scandal, one that could damage a family's reputation. Any normal child would have intervened, right? Yet, not a single family member caused a fuss. It just didn't make sense. Later, I interviewed a few of the elderly men involved, and let me tell you, these old guys acted like a bunch of jealous lovers, constantly threw harsh remarks on each other, sometimes even resorting to insults. But when I asked about their families, they all said the same thing. My family? They said they can't do anything about it. That was when my gut told me there was more behind their story. Later, I had a chat with a local community official. At first, she tried to warn me off. Reporter, you'd best leave this alone. Ma Guiying, she has done them a great kindness. What do you mean? A great kindness? Then she dropped a bombshell. Apparently, Ma Guiying's influence on this old man went far beyond simple romance. Many of them had serious health issues before meeting her, but after they got involved with her, they miraculously got better. One old man had severe diabetes and had nearly died several times. But after meeting Ma, he was practically cured. Another was 81 years old and already showing signs of dementia. But after meeting Ma, he suddenly became sharp as ever. In fact, he was so obsessed with her that if he didn't see her for a few days, he would start crying and threatening to kill himself. It was like he had become a completely different person. At that moment, I thought, damn, is this woman some kind of living goddess? But honestly, I didn't believe it. Dementia symptoms can fluctuate and diabetes can be managed, so I decided to dig deeper. Through a friend, I got access to the old man's hospital records, and guess what? The doctor's exact words were, "His recovery is nothing short of a miracle." That left me completely speechless. Then I went back to interview Ma Guiying again, trying to get her to sleep up. She told me she was originally from Jiangxi province, had only received a primary school education, and had never married, also no children. Before coming to this village, she had worked at a restaurant in a neighboring village, but eventually she quit and used her savings to move here. As for why she chose this village, she said it was simply to make a living. She claimed she was just good at befriending elderly men. They got along well, had great conversations, but there was nothing shady about their relationships. They were just good friends, nothing more. In fact, she said she had many such friends back in the neighboring village as well. I asked her directly, "Do you know how to heal people?" Me? No way. I don't know a thing about medicine. But my friends are all good people, and good people are blessed with good fortune. Then, no matter how much I pushed, she wouldn't say anything else. I really wanted to investigate further, but due to work pressures, I had no choice but to let it go. The only resolution was that two of the elderly men ended up on television fighting over her on air. That was how we closed the segment. But during the interview, Ma Guiying made a request. She begged the elderly man to stop fighting over her. She said, "This isn't good. If we are friends, we should cherish each other, not argue. We should all live well. I don't want to get married, I just want to be friends with you all." So I played these clips for the two old men. Did they listen? Not at all. They stared dreamily at the screen, completely captivated by Ma. It was like they were under some kind of spell. Then, when the clip ended, they went right back to insulting each other. And that's how this strange story ended without an ending. Later, I heard that in 2005, Ma Guiying quietly left the village, but none of the elderly men cried or searched for her. Life simply went back to normal. But I can't help but wonder, did their illnesses return too? I don't know what to make of Ma Guiying. Was she using some kind of sorcery? Was she a spirit medium? Or was she simply someone with a special kind of energy? One that could help people in exchange for financial support? Honestly, I have no idea. But one thing for sure, if we could mass produce more Ma Guiyings, maybe sickness and disease would disappear from the world forever. The city I live in has a well-preserved ancient city wall. Around it, there were still many old residential houses. But to modernize the city, the government decided to relocate the residents and demolish those buildings. Of course, when it comes to this kind of thing, there are always people who refuse to move. But thanks to the staff's persuasion and generous compensation, most people gradually agreed to leave, except for one family. This family had 3 members, an elderly woman in her 80s and a young couple. The old lady had been bedridden for years, while the couple ran a small shop. They didn't seem well off, so logically, if they were offered enough money, they should have taken the deal. But no matter how much compensation they were promised, they refused to leave. The reason? They claimed that if they moved, the entire family would die. With no other choice, the head of the local district office personally stepped in to persuade them. That's when they realized the young couple was actually willing to live. It was the old lady who refused. Well, it wasn't unusual for elderly people to be attached to their homes, so the officials figured he just needed to visit her more often, build some trust, and talk her into it. He started dropping by with gifts, checking in on her, trying to ease her concerns. But no matter what he said or bought, the old lady wouldn't budge. She refused everything, repeating the same words, "We can't move." And through it all, she barely spoke, just kept staring at a big tree in their courtyard. The official was at a loss. Finally, he contacted the local neighborhood committee to say if they knew more about her situation. One of the committee members said, "Oh, I know her well. Maybe I can go help with you." So the 2 of them visited again. As soon as they walked in, the old lady recognized the committee member and even invited them to stay for lunch. But the moment the topic of moving came up, her eyes reddened. She grabbed the official's hand and said, "Director, please don't make this hard for us. If we move, all 5 of us will die." The official froze. 5? Wasn't their family just 3 people? Where did the other 2 come from? At that moment, chill ran down his spine. He didn't press the issue anymore and decided to leave. Later, an old colleague finally told him the truth about the old lady's past. Before 1949, her father-in-law had made a fortune smuggling salt. But since it was illegal, the family didn't want their son involved in the same business, so they sent him to school instead. Unfortunately, he wasn't particularly good at studying, and after graduating, he ended up working in a state-owned company in a cultural position where he met the old lady and the 2 got married and had a son. Life was peaceful for a while, but then the Cultural Revolution hit. Maybe someone was jealous, but eventually, her father-in-law's past was exposed. He was arrested and later died, leaving the family to deal with the fallout. To make things worse, her husband, a so-called intellectual, became a target during the political turmoil. He was humiliated and persecuted constantly, but this man had grown up sheltered, unable to withstand the pressure. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore and hung himself from the big tree in their courtyard. With that, their family was shattered. The old lady, however, was incredibly strong. She endured everything and raised her son alone, eventually seeing him get married. Life slowly stabilized. Seeing that she was alone, her siblings suggested she remarry. But she simply smiled and said, "Are you kidding? He'll be back soon." Her family thought she was just grieving too hard and tried to talk her out of it, but no matter what they said, she stuck to her belief. Her husband would return. Sure enough, several days later, something strange happened. One day, Her son caught her sitting under the big tree in the courtyard, talking to herself. It scared the hell out of him. He rushed over and asked her what she was doing. But she just turned to him, still smiling, then looked back at the empty space and said, "Come, look at your son. He's all grown up now." "Mom, what are you doing? Stop scaring me." "Your father is back. You can't see him, but I can. He's staying with us from now on." That night, her son was so terrified that he went to stay at a friend's house. But that was just the beginning of a long nightmare. Soon, talking to the tree became part of the old lady's daily routine. Her family, completely at a loss, immediately assumed she was possessed and rushed to bring in a spirit medium to perform an exorcism. The neighborhood committee was not happy about this. At the time, the government was cracking down on superstitious practices, and if higher-ups found out about the exorcism, the committee would absolutely be in trouble. So, staff members hurried over to talk sense into the old lady, but to their surprise, she was completely lucid. She could hold a normal conversation, answer questions logically. She just insisted on talking to the tree every day. That's when one of the most experienced staff members started piecing things together. Maybe she wasn't crazy. Maybe this was her way of protesting her husband's unjust death. Was she hoping for some kind of compensation? So, the staff member tried a different approach. "Sister, I know your family has been through a lot. Is there anything we can do to help?" "We're doing just fine. I have a job, my son has a job, and he's back now. We're a family again." And just like that, the conversation circled back to where it started. With no other options, they took her to the hospital for a checkup. The doctor also couldn't find anything physically wrong with her. He said she was probably just grieving too much and prescribed some sedatives. But whether she actually took the medicine or not, no one knew, because nothing changed. Day after day, she continued talking to the tree. That's when a new rumor started spreading. The problem wasn't the old lady, it was the house. As long as the old lady stayed in there, she would never get better. So, to help, the company she worked for even offered her a free apartment in a dormitory. But of course, she refused. She wouldn't move, no matter what. Looking back, this was probably the beginning of her becoming a new house owner. Years passed, her son got married, and the couple had a child, and then things took a darker turn. Since both parents had to work, the grandmother took on the responsibility of looking after the baby. But soon, the family noticed something disturbing. She started holding the baby while talking to the tree. That was the last straw for the daughter-in-law. Terrified, she quit her job, opened a small shop near the home, and stayed there full-time to care for her child. But even then, tragedy struck. One evening, after finishing work, the mother walked into the courtyard and collapsed in shock. Her child was lying unconscious at the base of the tree, and the grandmother was nowhere to be found. Terrified, she rushed the boys to the hospital, but it was too late. The doctors verdict, death from a fall. But from where? The courtyard had no high places, except for the tree. But how could a 4-year-old climb that high enough to fall to his death? The parents were devastated, crying uncontrollably. That's when the old lady finally showed up at the hospital. She explained calmly, "I was playing with him, but I got sleepy, so I went inside to rest. I left him with his grandfather. He said he'd bring him back soon." The moment she said those words, everyone's face went pale, and the daughter-in-law also fainted on the spot. From then on, the couple never had another child. Perhaps they were too afraid of such tragedy repeating itself, and that little boy, the one who died, became the 5th person in the house. At this point, the rumors about moving out to escape the curse grew stronger. Slowly, even the couple began to believe it. But no matter how much they begged, the old lady refused. She even said, "If I move out, who will take care of them?" In the end, the couple spent all their savings to buy an apartment nearby and moved out. As for the old lady, they converted the kitchen into her bedroom. This way, she could see the tree first thing every morning. Life finally settled down. As for the demolition plans, Well, the family never moved out. Even today, if you go to that area, you will see a towering cluster of high-rise buildings, with one single old, crumbling house standing stubbornly among them. At night, you will notice only one light on, glowing softly on the fifth floor, a single, lonely light, keeping watch over a tree and the two spirits resting beneath it. She didn't take good care of her grandson when he was alive, but once he was gone, he spent every day and night guarding his spirit. I don't really get that logic. But this story does bring up an interesting concept in Chinese metaphysics, the separation between the living and the dead. In Chinese beliefs, people generally don't encourage coexisting with ghosts, even if they are harmless. First, ghosts are considered a form of negative energy, which could affect a person's luck and well-being. Second, their way of thinking is vastly different from the living. Most spirits don't have the same level of complex reasoning as humans anymore. Take the old lady's husband, for example. I don't think he meant any harm, but he probably loved his grandson so much that he just wanted him to stay with him forever, so he took him. To us, that's unthinkable. No matter how much you love someone, you wouldn't take their life just to keep them close, right? But spirits don't think like us. Their minds work in a straight line, kind of like, I want it, I got it. That's why, in China, if people know a place is haunted, they usually choose to stay far away rather than live alongside spirits. Of course, this is just one perspective from Chinese culture. Maybe in different beliefs, ghosts behave differently. What do you think? Okay, that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.